Glad to have my friend back. It's Dinesh D'Souza, producer of great movies, star of these movies, also an author who's got a bunch of incredible books. The latest is called The Big Lie, and I want you to go and get it. It is a must-read. Dinesh, how are you?
Hey, great to be on the show, Joe.
Hey, first and foremost, we've got the hurricane that just came through. You've got a house in Houston. I've been on Houston radio for 10 or 11 years now. We're seeing what's happening in our state, and it's really kind of cool to see people put politics aside for a second to go and take care of those who are in need. First of all, is your house okay? Are your people okay? You guys are good?
Yes, it's doing absolutely fine. I've always wanted to take my wife, Debbie, to Venice. We've never been, so to actually see Houston transformed into Venice,
yeah,
we yet have a boat. But some of the roads around the house look like lakes,
yeah.
But happily our house appears to be quite intact.
Well, interestingly, and I want to go from that to, because that's what our focus should be in the country right now, to San Antonio, which is where my flagship is. You know that. In San Antonio, while this crisis is happening, 2.5 hours west or east or 2.5, 3 hours south, where our fellow Texans are in dire straits, and we should be using all of our resources and our prayers and our activities to go and help them. In the middle of the day on a Thursday, the city council quickly voted, I think it was 10-1, to get rid of a statue in Travis Park. It was a statue of an unnamed Confederate soldier, rifled by his side, just a commemoration of what the war was about for the Deep South and so on. It had been for 100+ years in the same place. At midnight last night, you had police out there and cranes removing this statue, literally in the dark of night. Dinesh, is this a matter of never let a serious crisis go to waste? Well, everybody's focusing attention over there. Let's go and delete some history here. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I think about this Confederate soldier. Most likely the guy was a poor rancher or a poor farmer. The chances are 10-1 he didn't own any slaves. One of the Confederate soldiers was asked, "Why are you fighting for the Confederacy?" And he gave the simple answer, "Because the Yankees are down here." In other words, a lot of the Confederates were just fighting for what they saw as a threatened way of life.
Yeah.
This was their livelihood. This was their country. This was their neck of the woods, if you will. And so to demonize that guy, to me, is just ridiculous. It's shameful, it's disgraceful, and it's deceitful, because the Democrats, who actually promoted slavery, who actually were in league with the big cotton planters and the big tobacco planters and the big rice planters, the people who used this Confederate soldier to fortify the Democratic Party's hold on the South, this is the party that is now transferring historically the blame for what it did onto this poor dude who probably would never know what hit him. And so to me, it's more than a tragedy. It really represents a political, ideological cover-up of really shameful magnitude.
It's Dinesh D'Souza. The name of the book is The Big Lie. I urge you to go and get it. Read it with your family. Make sure that you really understand what has happened in our history. History is what it is, but there is a movement to hide our history. Thus, you see these Confederate soldiers disappearing, or Robert E. Lee High School in San Antonio was renamed, or it was ordered to be renamed a few days ago as well. It was a vote of 5-2 or 7-2, whereas a couple of years ago, it was almost unanimous to not change the name. So they're really sort of jumping on the bandwagon of everything Southern is bad, everything Confederate is bad, history is not good, and we're seeing city councils not going through a vote, just removing things that have been there for a century. We've got school boards that have been voted in, probably will be voted out now, against the will of the people, changing the name of a high school that has been that for generations and generations. Where does it stop, or does it? I mean, this is obviously what Obama wanted. Obama said we have to fundamentally change America. His wife said we have to change the traditions and the history of America. Is this sort of a byproduct of what they wanted? And does it stop, Dinesh, or do we just forget history?
Well, the real irony is that the statues that they're taking down, that the Democrats and the left are taking down, are statues of Democrats.
That's true.
So, had these Democrats had they taken a little different stance and said, listen, we as a Democratic Party acknowledge that we did some horrible things in the past. We don't want to be that way in the future. We're going to acknowledge what we did. We were the party of slavery, of segregation, of Jim Crow, of the Ku Klux Klan, of racial terrorism. We tried to block the civil rights movement. We did all that.
Yeah.
But in acknowledgement of that, we now want to, in a sense, atone for it. And to atone for it, we're going to take down the statues of some Democrats and relocate them to museums, not to forget our history, but to actually remember better. They're not doing this. What they're doing is a very sly campaign to lift the weight of their own shoulders.
Right.
And it's a move that Freud would have recognized, to transfer the blame onto the South, onto the white man, onto America, even onto the Republican Party, which fought them all the way.
It is Dinesh D'Souza, movie producer, best-selling author. The new book is called The Big Lie. Go and get it. You'll also love Hillary's America, The Secret History of the Democratic Party. Go and get that as well. Dinesh, I paid a lot of attention. You know, I've got 13 stations in Texas, and then we're heard and seen across the land as well. And I've watched all the video I can. We've raised some money by giving out the websites and done whatever we could. I have not seen, maybe you've seen this, and maybe you can correct me. I haven't seen not one picture, not one meme, not one video of Antifa or Black Lives Matter going to Houston, going to Rockport, going to Port Aransas, Port Lavaca, any of the affected areas and the surrounding areas to go and help, to go give a helping hand. I mean, if they're really out to just help everybody and everybody's the same and we need equal justice and social justice, wouldn't they be in the front lines helping out?
Not only are there no signs of them helping, but you've actually seen all these nasty comments to the effect that, gee, the Texans voted for the Republicans and now they're getting their comeuppance.
Right.
And then, of course, that horrific cover of the Charlie Hebdo magazine in France, which I think is the way other people think as well, that sort of, you know, God has answered our prayers by drowning a bunch of neo-Nazis. So it shows you that the best of America, but also the worst of America, dramatized by this latest tragedy.
While this is going on, we've got Antifa, the misnamed hate group. The misnamed, they're actually the fascists, not the anti-fascists. We see them beating people up who dare say they support the country. They believe in nationalism. They support Donald Trump. Dinesh, let's settle it once and for all, because I'm really tired of having the argument. Who is Antifa? Where did they come from? Who funds them? And what should be done with them?
So Antifa is the left-wingers who are using fascist tactics, who dress like fascists. I mean, look at Mussolini had a paramilitary organization called the Black Shirts. Yeah. They wore black, they wore masks, they carried weapons and sticks. These guys are exactly the same, and they serve the same purpose. They're there to intimidate, to threaten people, to beat up their political opponents, to silence free speech. Same organization, same objective. They also have a fascist ideology, because the fascist ideology is the all-powerful collectivist state. Don't believe a word about these Antifa guys being anarchists. Had Hillary Clinton won, she would have weaponized the state against its political opponents. Since they don't have that kind of power, that's why they're doing it from troop leader, the brown shirts, to taking power. He disbanded the brown shirts and he used the state, the army, to achieve the same things that he previously would use thugs to do on the street. So Antifa is a fascist organization masquerading as an anti-fascist organization, funded by a guy with a very interesting history, George Soros.
Well, it's Dinesh D'Souza. The name of the book is The Big Lie. I want you to go and get it, see every movie that he's done. I want you to read every book that he's read or that he's written. And I also want you to go on Twitter and Facebook and follow him. Incredible education every single day if you follow his feeds. You bring up George Soros. George Soros is an unapologetic Nazi sympathizer and not Nazi assister. And for some reason, people like Antifa or Black Lives Matter or these far left-wing radical groups that really, I think, are the new generation of the KKK and neo-Nazis themselves, they embrace this guy's money. Do they, Dinesh, simple question, do they not know who he is and what his history is, or they just don't care because the money's green?
Well, the remarkable thing is that the purportedly anti-fascist group is being funded by a guy who has a direct link to the Nazis. Also, at a time when the media is trying to out Steve Bannon because he said he was, quote, alt-right, or Sebastian Gorka, these are guys who are covering up for George Soros. Recently, the fact-checking website, so-called, it's called Snopes.com.
Right.
They ran an article, "Is George Soros a former SS officer?" Now, this was very cunning, because in refuting a false rumor, no, George Soros was not an SS officer.
And nobody said he was.
Nobody said he was.
Right.
The main thing is that what he was is he was a collection boy for Hitler. When he was in his teens, he and a bunch of other guys would rampage through Jewish neighborhoods in his native Hungary, which was then Nazi-occupied Hungary, confiscate Jewish property, and turn it over to the regime. Now, all right, he was trying to survive. He pretended to be a Christian. He was trying to get by.
Yeah.
Fine. But that was when he was in his teens. George Soros is now a mature man. But when asked about it by Steve Kroft of CBS News, hey, George Soros, do you have any regrets? This is when I think the clouds parted and you began to see the real George Soros. He goes, well, no, why would I have any regrets? He said, all that bad stuff was happening anyway. So in a sense, he was immunizing himself or refusing to take responsibility because in his view, bad stuff was going to happen anyway. So why not take advantage of it?
It would have been so much smarter for him just to say, well, yeah, I feel horrible now, because then you don't have the real look into who he is. And also you can understand why these drones follow him. This is on the record. You showed me this answer that he gave to Croft. He says, of course. Yeah.
But with having an actual direct link to Nazism.
It is Dinesh D'Souza. The name of the book is The Big Lie. I want you to go and get it. Dinesh, are we starting to make a little bit of headway? And I ask because of this. Nancy Pelosi actually was guilted into saying that she wasn't a supporter of Antifa in the past week or so. Are we starting to break through? Are people starting to wake up a little bit and understand the far left radical history of the Democrat Party?
You know, I would like to think so. I would like to think that Nancy Pelosi has been looking at all this footage of Antifa and had a kind of moral epiphany, which is to say, this is really objectionable, reprehensible behavior. But I suspect that probably what's more likely is that Nancy Pelosi looks at this and goes, wow, I thought we had a nice paramilitary operation for functioning for the Democratic Party, kind of the way we had the Klan in the old days. But now that there's all this video footage and people can see Antifa thugs descending on a military veteran in a wheelchair trying to beat him up, this is making us look really bad. We've got to put some distance with this. So I think it may be tactical more likely than some sort of a moral conversion.
Do you think the president should call Antifa a terrorist group, just claim that they're a terrorist group and we're going to treat them as such?
Well, here's my suggestion for the week, Joe. There's coming up at Berkeley, a Berkeley Free Speech Week. And the mayor of Berkeley, Jesse Aragon, has actually called on Berkeley to cancel Free Speech Week. I mean, think of the irony.
Imagine
Let's
that.
Free Speech Week. Right now, here's what I think Trump should do. I think, remember in the 50s when the Democratic governor Orville Faubus tried to block the Arkansas schoolhouse and prevent black kids from exercising their right to go to school? I think Trump should send in the National Guard and basically say, listen, the National Guard is there to protect our basic constitutional right to free speech. And so you'd have Trump on the side of free speech and Berkeley, the venue of the free speech movement, against free speech. That's the kind of tactical move that Trump needs to make. True, the left will start screaming and they'll say, oh, he's bringing in the police and so on. But bringing in the police to enforce the First Amendment is a whole lot different than bringing in the police to subvert the First Amendment.
I think it's an amazing idea. Dinesh, I appreciate the time as always. The name of the book is The Big Lie. Make sure you go and get that. If you haven't seen Hillary's America, The Secret History of the Democratic Party, make sure you go and see that as well. There's an education in everything Dinesh does that you just aren't seeing in public schools anymore. And Dinesh, really great stuff. And I appreciate the time, my friend.